Alright, so just a quick review of what we covered. We learned about light logic. Light logic meaning that shadow patterns behave a certain way. When you have an object like an egg, you have a shadow on the form itself, which exists because the form is starting to turn away from the light source. And at a certain point, the light source, those light rays, can't reach those planes of that egg anymore, and so it drops into shadow. So this little segment here is called the form shadow. It exists because the form has angled away so much that the light rays can't touch it. Then we also have this kind of a shadow, which exists because this egg here is blocking the light rays from reaching this part of the surface here. So this is called a cast shadow. It exists because something, in this case this egg, is blocking the light. The form shadow plus the cast shadow create what we call the shadow mass. And the shadow mass is our key to creating a good first step in creating strong values in your drawing. So rather than describing your drawing through gradations and using these little amorphous little smudges where you begin with some shading and you hope that that will translate form, it's much wiser to begin with the edges of your shadow pattern, the edge on the form, the edge of the actual object, as well as the edges of that cast shadow. And when you have that pattern outlined, and I hate to say outlined, then you fill that in a no-tan manner. So no-tan just means in a passive mark application. So now if I ask somebody, hey, cut out the shadow pattern for me, they would know exactly where to cut. Whereas if you have these amorphous little smudgy fields, it's hard to tell. Where am I supposed to cut? Am I supposed to cut here, here, here? Am I supposed to cut here? Like where's the edge? So our pattern's success depends on the clarity of the edges. So a good pattern, nicely, clearly delineated, using straight angles because they help us be more precise with where an apex is. You can always curve it out later, and you have a good pattern. So now the second layer to the shadow mapping or light logic puzzle, I use those two terms interchangeably, is that the form shadow edges differ in their quality from the cast shadow edges. So if you look at this little drawing up here, it explains why a form shadow exists. Again, the form shadow exists because the plane of the object, in this case a strip of paper, is turning away, in this case like this, turning away from the light source. So the light's coming up here, turning away, and around this point it's starting to roll into the shadow. And depending on how gradual or abrupt, even more abrupt, this plane change is, the softness of the shadow edge changes. Abrupt plane change, sharp shadow edge. More gradual, slightly softer. Even more gradual, super soft. So the form shadow edges depend on the degree of the plane change. So in an egg, you have a fairly soft gradation, so you're creating this as a soft edge by lightly moving our pencils up and down along this edge. Cast shadow edges always behave the same in that they're crisp, close to the object creating them. And as they move away from this object, they start to get a little bit more soft and open. The other thing about cast shadow edges is, let's say we have a little stick casting a shadow. It takes on the curvature of whatever it's falling over. So those are two things you want to remember about the cast shadow edges. Crisp, close to the object, casting them. As they move away, they start to get fuzzy. And whenever they fall over something, you're going to make them take on the volume of what it falls over. Okay, so those are the things I need you to remember about light logic and shadow mapping.